A very good afternoon, everybody. Welcome again to Friday Drinks. It's on a Friday, and the weather is changing. I think it's getting hotter and hotter during the day. It gets cooler in the evening, but I think for the most part, it's actually hot. And tell us, last week you were not feeling exactly well. Has the leg, has it healed?
No, much better. Sometimes, being...
What actually happened?
Sometimes you can turn an ankle sometimes when you run on our roads.
Yeah.
Okay.
And how's that going?
No, it's it intensifies in the first half of the year as you train for comrades. Mm-hmm. And then after comrades, we kind of fall off the wagon and get lazy, and it's very difficult to get...
But on a week, how many times, or how many Ks do you do in a week?
It varies. I think at the height of comrades training, you're doing like 50, 60 Ks a week.
And then after?
And then, they encourage you to take like a month off after comrades to let your body completely recover. And, so that 1 month ends up 2 months later, you're still... You're still not quite back in the mode. And the thing that happens, especially for those of us on the wrong side of 40, is that you gain a lot of weight.
Oh, that's true.
Like easily 7, 8, 10 kgs. And then
during that period,
like if you do like 30, 45 days of little to no running, after a period where you're doing 50, 60 Ks every week.
Oh, that's true.
So you just, and then also what happens is you're much more disciplined about what you eat ahead of comrades, and then afterwards you're like, you're in this mindset of I must let my hair down, I must relax, I'm going to recover, and I'm going to eat what I like, and then you just and then you get back on the road with this extra. Yeah,
that's hard on the.
It's hard on all the joints, and it's a mission.
All right, and have you started running or
no?
What do you have to? What do you exercise?
Look, honestly, I haven't been. I've been going to gym, I think just before winter, and then winter came. I just stopped, and just like Shumba here, I was like, no, it's just a week. But I'm hoping to go back. And it's very interesting because I've got some equipment at home. Have I ever used it?
You've never used it?
No. It's only my daughter who uses it sometimes.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So, but I think you need, the discipline that, comes with maybe going to the gym, being encouraged, being other people.
Personal trainer.
Yeah, personal trainer, seeing other people doing this and that. This thing of thinking that you can hold the equipment and then you start trading, it's not going to work.
It doesn't necessarily work. I get
you. Work.
And the farming, you become a tobacco farmer?
Well, look, I'm just trying my hands on farming.
He's been identifying as a farmer.
So I'm trying on a number of
he's sequentially failing on different crops.
Yes. Yeah. So I guess at some point I'll
figure it right. You'll figure it out.
Yeah, but
you can't go wrong with tobacco.
Look, I don't know. It's obviously I owe a lot of all these experiments to George when we visited his farm in his.
So why are you not just learning from George? George has been experimenting for the last 10 years, and we now know what works and what doesn't work.
Yes, obviously I know what I can learn from George, but I also believe that I should have an opportunity to learn, to have my on my own. Right?
Make your own.
Yeah, at the right time, I'll certainly get George, learn from him. He has got a very good network of people that also helped him along the way. But I also don't want to deprive myself of an opportunity to just learn, to have my own sort of lesson.
Learning curve.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well,
yourself, I saw, nice videos, you doing some things in this place that you're disparaging this other day. Good to, and you're doing a lot of things.
Well, we clearly have to do something about it. We started rebuilding good. Yeah.
No, that's good.
We'll see. We'll also venture, but I'm not going to experiment.
Okay.
I think that George is ready.
Experimented
He's
for years.
experimented for the last 10 years. I've seen George lose money and then finally get it right.
Okay.
So all I'm just going to do is just use his,
Okay.
the plan that he has and what he has done and what actually is working, because we now can see it and it works. So I'm not going to, I'm not experimenting at all. There are other places where I will experiment, but I'm not. I'm not going to.
But like the passion that you guys have for farming and the actual skill set that you have in investment banking, I thought that the wisest course of action would be to marry those the passion and the actual skill set, and then instead of attempting operating a farm where you don't have the skill set, you just identify people who are competent and you fund them. This is where you're competent, right? You're competent in raising money and deploying it, and then so you scratch your passion itch, right? Because you're interacting with farmers and they you're walking up and down a farm that's actually productive and profitable, right? And you're deploying capital. Whereas if you don't have the competence and you deploy capital to a farm that you're operating yourself without the skills, you're just going to lose a bunch of money.
Yeah, I think you're quite right, and that's exactly what I'm doing. And that's why I've gone back to my rurals. And the idea is to bring investment banking in the rural sector, in the rural economy.
Yeah, I think that will work. Like you identify, like you talk to people,
schemes, and a lot of that's.
Because I can't see you waking up at 4 a.m. and going out to a field and
I'm not that guy.
And neither is Zia. So
and I've never said that guy. But certainly in terms of just capital and bringing capital to the rural economy, that's actually what I think I could.
And you get the expert operators to come through and evaluate the the candidates, and you just deploy the capital.
Yeah, no, absolutely. But there are a lot of challenges in the rural economy, and those are the nibbling challenges that one has to, jump over. Those are the hoops that one has to jump over. But then immediately after that, then it's scalable, and then you're able to invite capital.
Yeah, because at this rate, I don't know how many different crops Zia is going to go through before he figures
it out. George has clearly given us what to do. Okay. He's tried every crop you could ever think of, and a lot of those crops didn't work. But because he's got so much money, he's finally got it right. And it's clear what you must do.
He's also almost masochistically persistent. A lesser man would have quit.
Yeah, a long time ago. So that's why I just don't understand why this guy wants to, start on his own, learning curve when there's so many lessons.
No. Look, remember I've said that I'm picking all those lessons. Okay. So from George and all the other guys, we have got quite a number of our friends who have ventured into farming. Mm-hmm. I think quite a number of them doing cattle ranching. Some have really become quite successful at it. Obviously, that's it's capital intensive. So we've got all these people that we can possibly that I can possibly learn from.
So where did you pick up tobacco?
It's really because I found myself in an area where tobacco is done. It's really experimental. It's really experimental. I believe that maybe I need like a year or two to really figure out what I want to do. Okay. But for now, it's really to work the land.
Anyway, the next time anyone disparages me for having an expensive hobby, like interest in whiskey.
So are you equating the farming to your
what? Yeah? I spend 10 to 100 times this money.
You'd rather drink it
you might as well talk about this drinking. It's quite fancy there.
And I get all the value.
True. Okay. So tell us.
No, this is a gift from my friend Blawizo. He was in the guest lounge last week, and
clearly he loves you.
Zia was very proactive.
Yes, I was waiting for it.
Because we had quite a late night, and you know, Blawito decided, look, you know what, whatever happens tonight, one of the problems that we're not going to have is running out of tipple. So he brought he brought out this bottle, and Zia.
So this was for last week.
Yeah, and Zia put his foot down and says, "No, you guys are not drinking that today. We're going to drink it on the show next week." And then he took it away and he locked it away.
Well done.
Because they already had enough.
So it turns out that was
And you must say I become quite unpopular.
that evening.
Yeah, with the judges and all those people. Yeah.
So well done to Zia.
Yeah, so yeah,
He's the responsible one.
You see, I even look after my drunk friends.
Yeah. He's the responsible one.
He's the
At least now
responsible
you can actually have it today. All right. Thank you very much.
And you guys have a lot of ingredients on the table.
Winter is gone, so we're about to welcome spring, and we just thought we have a spring drink, and we'll have a Malawi Shandi, which we haven't had for 4 months or so because of winter. So, we can be very colorful today, and that's exactly what we're going to do, right?
Sure.
I have it with Mazoe, and then you have it with your funny drink. What's it called?
It's called fruited. It's better than Mazoe.
I don't know about
okay.
that.
Yeah, it's certainly better than Mazoe.
Okay, all that I know for a fact is that in the public's imagination, one of them is iconic and the other one is new. I'm not.
Yeah. So
He's a guy who loves to experiment.
Yes, exactly.
Yes. Zia loves to experiment.
if you are comfortable with trying new things, you then discover that this fruited drink is actually way much better than Mazoe Orange Crush. It's iconic, I know that, but yeah, it's really.
No, but you see, the thing is, I will push back on the premise that one is better than the other. I think with these subjective things that are a function of people's tastes, we can just say at best that they're different. If we want an objective measure, let's ask the market which
I think
which of the brands sells more, right?
Anyway, we are not here to market them, so maybe let's just get on with the show.
But by the way, we have, in fact, we have a lot of Mazoe shrubs here. They need to sponsor us. Who do we need to talk to? Please, if anybody in the audience, if you know who we need to speak to as far as Shrubs Orange is concerned, please reach out to them, and then they need to sponsor, because we've been promoting them for the better part of the last 3 years. Yeah, they need to sponsor. But anyway, gentlemen, we've got a very interesting discussion, and the first one that I want us to discuss is just down a rabbit hole, and the particular rabbit hole has to do with CZI and ZNCC, wanting an audience with the president, primarily because they think that we're not moving fast enough as far as policy change is concerned, and more primarily as far as regulatory environment is concerned, that the industry and everything is constrained. And these are our friends from CZI and ZNCC. I think the people that were quoted were Sekai and then Tapio as well from ZNCC. So maybe let's start with you, Rufaro, and you can give us a view of what's actually where we are as far as the regulatory environment and the business environment is concerned. Do we have a leg to stand on as business, and the sort of things that we're pushing?
Yeah, so firstly, I want to give kudos to the ZNCC and CZI for speaking out. I think one of the gripes that we've had on our show for the longest time is that we don't seem to, that is when I say we, the business community, make enough noise about what's not working in terms of, in the regulatory environment, in terms of the policy environment. And I think, it's out of a misplaced concern of appearing unduly political, when these issues are purely economic and, in my mind, have nothing to do with the politics. So I want to give a lot of credit to the ZNCC and CZI for raising these issues and making the kind of noises that we've been making, frankly, on this show from inception. So I think it's fantastic. And so to speak to the detail a little bit, we've got a regulatory framework and an economic policy environment that is inimical to economic growth and a thriving private sector, right? So you've got from a macroeconomic level, if you think about exchange controls, it makes it very difficult to raise capital beyond our shores to drive growth here. You've got all these retentions that are hurting exporters because the local leg is not fully fungible. They're not able to actually deploy it. Sometimes they don't even get the ZIG liquidity that they're supposed to get. And we've observed, particularly over the last 18 to 36 months, a formal sector that has been punished by this macroeconomic environment so much that it has so much that it lost meaningful market share to the informal sector. And these guys are not paying taxes. They don't operate with all the licenses and within all the regulations that the formal sector is constrained by, which, apart from being unfair, it's also bad for the fiscus because it basically shrinks the tax base. And obviously organizations like CZI and ZNCC represent the formal sector, and they've been suffering. We've been suffering, frankly, for the last 18 to 36 months. So I'm delighted that they're finally making this noise and engaging, and I wish them all the best in their engagements.
Okay. Zia, it's a very simple and straightforward one. Are we in a crisis, and is it okay what CZI and ZNCC are doing in engaging the president because there is a crisis? So could you define what crisis we're in, if you agree that we are in a crisis? And do you think that this is the right thing to do, to actually address this crisis directly with the president? So
when you look at it from the formal businesses point of view, things are not looking good. For most of the established businesses that are running their operations formally, there are a lot of things that could be improved. And, so there's the informal sector, but I don't want to put it as if the informal sector is thriving and that the economy is actually going to be driven by the informal sector. So there's the informal sector. Then there's actually some business that are, I don't know, it's more on the illegal side, or, people that are gray businesses,
okay.
Yeah.
So it's not actually the informal sector.
It's not the informal sector.
But it's...
Yeah, it's, so I think there are certain businesses, there are certain operations that look like they are thriving, simply because they cut corners, simply because they've got access to certain favors, to certain, resources that other business people are not, do not have access to. So maybe when you look around, you see, you might see what looks like progress or development in certain areas that you can't really quantify. But when you look at the actual formal business that you interact with, that that they are paying all their taxes, they are ticking all the regulatory boxes, and etc., those businesses are facing all these issues that we have because, for example, access to credit. Business don't have access to credit.
And on that point, actually, the last Reserve Bank report that actually came out, we know that private sector has actually been borrowing offshore and not onshore. In fact, offshore borrowings have actually increased by 35%. It's up, for the first 6 months of the year, we borrowed over $1 billion offshore because the local market has been crowded out by government. So private sector cannot access credit from the formal market.
From the formal market. And then we've got all these other high cost of regulation. Zim is actually one of those highly regulated markets. And the regulations sometimes the regulators do not consider the viability of some of these businesses. And I think the big theme that always come out when you try to find out why are we that regulated is because the treasury wind off all, regulatory agencies to say, what, you should fend for yourselves. So instead of really providing regulation so that business is done fairly, they're actually out there to make money for survival. So when you find some regulator visiting your offices, it's not really because they want you to abide by regulation to ensure that, the product safety is observed and things like that. They're actually looking for money for survival.
So you've picked up two. So it's regulatory and crowding out of the local financial services. Could you speak to exporters who are not getting their money? We know now it's about 176 million. We know that there are TBs that were due, so that haven't been paid out from Treasury, as far as Treasury is concerned. And then you've got suppliers, about 1.2 billion, that are owed from government that have not been paid out. And this is primarily to formal businesses. These are some of the challenges. And these are the challenges that business is saying the only person that can address them is the president. Would you like to speak to that?
Yeah, look, I think for the longest time when we've looked at government profligacy, one of the comments we've often made is to say it's not sustainable. And so when the music stops, when something like that is not sustainable, what does it look like? And this is the crisis that we're seeing today, where the government is failing to pay its obligations, whether they are treasury bills, whether it's the retentions that they owe some exporters, whether it's just their suppliers who have bills that are due. And it's only going to get worse if we don't actually pivot and change course, because the formal sector, which is where the government's tax revenue comes from, is shrinking, is hemorrhaging, is suffering, and therefore their contribution is in decline. And so whatever bills that that the state is racking up every month with these operations, its capacity to pay them is actually shrinking with the formal sector. So it is a crisis from this perspective, right? And certainly if you are a government contractor, or you're holding a TB that hasn't been paid, or you're an exporter and you've lost 30% of your revenue literally because you've been given an IOU for your retention, which is not liquid or useful in your business, you are actually in a crisis where you've seen a material portion of your working capital basically trapped. So it is a crisis, and I think the reason why the engagement or the calls for engagement have reached this level is because a lot of the members of CZI and ZNCC, if there isn't a course correction, face going bust. So it's a legitimate crisis.
Absolutely. Okay, so another one, again, picking up from the members themselves from CZI and ZNCC, where 80% of them said that one of our big problems is corruption in this country. So trading, where you can't trade properly anymore because corruption is a big thing that they're facing, and they think that corruption, they put it at the doorstep of government and government bureaucracy. Would you like to speak to that, primarily around corruption and how it actually affects business and operating in Zimbabwe?
It directly, corruption raises the cost of doing business. So where you have to, get some license, straightforward, you may find yourself having to pay someone because they've made themselves to be a gatekeeper. And there was a time when maybe I would say we've always had corrupt people, but I think the extent of corruption over the years has really ballooned to a point where it has become more like a norm. So whoever is running some offices, any bureaucrat running an important office, they will just tell you that they actually see that office as their target. You have to pay to a point where it's really it used to be subtle, but right now someone just tells you that nothing is going to get done until and unless you have paid. So what really then makes it worse is there are so many of these offices that you have to go through before you get something signed off, and each and every one of them has to be paid off. And it's actually a system that seems to cascade all the way, all the way. So if you're starting from some junior person that you're interacting with, rest assured that whatever they are getting from you, extorting from you, it goes all the way to their senior managers. It's a system that is there. And so it just makes it harder. And in fact, it was just now when we had the US ambassador just talking about how some American companies have had to, close their businesses or stop operating from Zimbabwe altogether simply because of the high level of corruption. So it's really something that needs to be done. But when you look around with all that's happening around us, whether people getting tenders, government tenders, and all those things, and just about everything that you're trying to do that is with a regulator, in Zim you're not gonna get it easy. You just have to pay.
So yeah,
it's acceptable. It's just
the hurdles are just a lot. Again, you see, the list is getting longer and longer. But again, another pivotal one and important one has to do with electricity. We've had these power cuts now running for, I would say, in the better part of the last 3 years, we've had some acute and chronic power outages, which means that business has to get or has to supplement its energy requirement using a very expensive fuel. Would you like to speak to that?
Yeah, no. So look, I think, I'm just going to tie in your question with what Ranga was talking about, in terms of corruption. It's a regulatory framework challenge, right? If you have a lot of regulations and you have government bureaucrats who are not paid competitively, right? There's this mythology around, when you're serving, you somehow don't deserve a market-related remuneration. You're going to magically survive on significantly less than what your colleague in the private sector is getting paid. So when you marry this excessive regulation with this idea where you're not paying market-related remuneration, you're going to have lots of corruption. And the reason why we have all these challenges with electricity is because you have a state monopoly and the price is regulated. If tomorrow everybody had to auction, if the market set the price of electricity, then you would never struggle if you had the money to buy electricity to get as much power as you want. Right?
Well, now you can get electricity at 23 cents a kilowatt hour if you're a farmer, but it's just not there.
That's the point. Because you've got all these rules about you can sell power to so and so at such and such a price, and if you wanted to build a power plant, you can't distribute it yourself. You can't build your own distribution infrastructure. You have to go through this distribution infrastructure, which comes with all these rules and regulations. And so anybody who actually has capital and is interested in generating power and distributing it, when they have a few conversations about how to make it happen, they're just too many hurdles, right? And I think I know that the government is unlikely to just completely privatize all the state-owned electricity infrastructure. So perhaps that might be a bridge too far. But I would propose a compromise in which they just let they can keep all the state-owned electricity infrastructure, but let the private sector build its own infrastructure if it wants to, without regulation. If there's an entrepreneur out there who thinks they can generate power and sell it for 40 cents because they've done their research and they've got customers that they can sell to,
it's still cheaper than diesel.
Why should some bureaucrat have to approve that, right? Why isn't the private sector completely free to build its own solutions, completely, independently of the state, just like in all these other sectors that are important as well, like education. You've got government schools and you've got private schools, right? And the private schools set their own fees and they have their own curriculums and way of doing things that's very different from what you see in the government schools. The same thing with healthcare.
And I think the starting point is to have an official position that says, guys, we are in a crisis. Why is that important? So when you then if there's an official acknowledgement that we've got a crisis, for example, on the power issue, it means government would then now invite private people to come and invest because they are trying to.
Well, they've already done that, but I think what Rufaro is talking about is dismantling the pricing.
No, but the problem is they are not doing that from a crisis perspective. That's why when you approach them, it appears like they're doing you a favor. That's
to set up a plan.
That's why some government official would really even ask you for a bribe to get this sign off. But, if you're in a crisis, I think what you just say is like, oh, guys, just go ahead. As long as, please don't do this, don't do that, so that you don't damage the environment. You don't. But right now, you've got a situation where, like, we've got a water crisis, like, for example, in Harare. Like, I haven't had seat water, like, ever since I became an independent resident. Like at my house, we've never had water from Seed Council. And the next thing that you do, so it's a crisis.
It is a crisis. You can't say we don't have a crisis.
It's a crisis. And now at household level, we are trying to resolve that, what's supposed to be a national crisis, and then try to find some localized solution. So I'm drilling a borehole. You know how expensive it is to drill a borehole. The next thing you're seeing some guy come and say, you know what, you have to be paying every month for the borehole. That I'm drilling the whole borehole because there's no water. If City of Harare starts supplying me water, why would I have a borehole at home? And again, people that are putting up solar plants, they're being charged. You have to apply to ZERA to do all this. It's not like they're enjoying it. So I think we have to accept that we have got a crisis, and everyone that is trying to come up with a localized solution, they're actually feeding into, part of the, resolving the crisis.
So that's a good point that Ranga is picking up on. And my question to you, Rufaro, is this. So on the other side of the ledger, we have government, and more primarily Treasury and RBZ, and they say, actually, we don't have a crisis. The economy is actually growing. We now have a $15 billion or $44 billion economy and 6% economic growth. What crisis? There is absolutely no crisis.
Yeah, well, look, I think that, it's the nature of politics for them to always say that they're doing a great job and everything is dandy. So I don't think it's realistic to expect the politicians to acknowledge a crisis unless it's an act of God. So I think, that's just, it would, in an ideal world, I completely agree with Tia. It's important to acknowledge we've got a crisis. Let's address it head on. But I don't think that's going to happen. What I would encourage the policymakers to indulge in is, a sandbox experiment. Already we've got the Victoria Falls, where from a financial services perspective, it's now being regulated by this new entity, the International Finance Services Center. Why not run an experiment where you let that town or city be completely deregulated as far as all these things that we are talking about are concerned, water, electricity, and see whether, the things, the things that we've been advocating work or not. And then, that's essentially, if you actually, from a historical perspective, what the Chinese did is they didn't reform all of China at once. They basically ran this experiment in special economic zones, right? And they said, okay, fine, there are these ideas that, are encouraging or are very different from the way we've been doing things. But we're not prepared to adopt them whole scale. Let's just create this zone around Shanghai, Shenzhen, and see how it goes. And they ran the experiment. It worked out really well.
And very, very good point. But there's another one before we move on. It has to do with tax. Because I think that a number of businesses, especially in the formal businesses, are really at wit's end as far as Zimbabwe is concerned, as far as our tax system is concerned. And yet we are seeing all around the world, people are actually reducing tax and not increasing taxes. Yet in Zimbabwe, remember when Mutuli came in 2018, the argument was, austerity for austerity, and then increased these taxes, and they were supposed to be really for the short term so that we close in our deficit. But they've been now with us for over 8 years, for around 8 years or so. But could you speak to our tax system and why, as business, we're also calling for lower taxes?
So when I look at the taxes, I look at it from maybe two viewpoints. So there is the issue of the tax rate on a number of like tax lines that we have, which one would say maybe it may need to be reduced, whether it's corporate tax or whatever other taxes. Yes. But there's also an element of the other specific tax lines that do not necessarily have to be there. IMTT that you're making reference to, it was merely introduced because maybe the numbers were not balancing. They just looked for ways of getting money from transactions. But it wasn't a tax that was really supportive of productive activities. If anything, we have seen the economy becoming more, it actually is responsible for, up to a certain point, for the level of informalization, especially of the payment system, where it's cheaper if you can to be paying, to be transacting in cash. Because every time that you are doing any money transfer, you are being charged 2% just for doing that. So basically, you are
unsustainable.
You are disincentivizing economic agents
to actually use the formal
from using the formal
I think we've really made the case why we are as business in a crisis, and why we think that perhaps the president is the only one that can really address a lot of these issues. So good luck to CZI and ZNCC and everybody in business, that we hope that the president is amenable to what business is saying, and that these issues are addressed, and addressed urgently. But let's move on. There is an interesting story here on ArcelorMittal. The CEO of ArcelorMittal came out and guns blazing at Zimbabwean steel imports, which he says it's undue and unfair pressure weighing on South Africa's struggling, steel industry. South Africa imports about 36% of its steel needs, and in the 6 months to June, the country brought in about 94,000 tons of steel billets, mainly used for products like bars and roads, duty-free from Zimbabwe. Why is this a problem, and why is ArcelorMittal complaining about Zimbabwean steel?
Well, South Africa, one of the gripes that the business world has globally with South Africa is it's also heavily regulated. I mean, and they've got all these labor laws and other regulatory constraints that affect business there. So I think the ArcelorMittal CEO is basically complaining that Manhize, the steel plant over there, is much more competitive than he is, because they don't have to follow the same rigorous regulatory environment. And so that obviously is affecting their business, their market share and competitiveness, and he's unhappy. So from his standpoint,
not just that. I mean, they're retrenching, they're stopping the Newcastle plant. And I think about 3,000 jobs have been lost. They can't be competitive anywhere in the world anymore. They can't export their steel because it's very expensive. Again, because of the high regulation and electricity costs. Zia, what's your thoughts on this? Why is South Africa complaining about steel that's actually coming from Zimbabwe? And would this be an issue for us?
I don't think so, and it's really, I think what he's saying to Zimbabwe is Zimbabwe is actually probably, one says Zimbabwe is making some strides in that area, and we know the only steel plant that we have is Manhize, right?
Well, we do have, so a lot of the steel that goes to South Africa, I think that Manhize hasn't really kicked in to
Okay.
affect South Africa, but a lot of scrap that comes from Zimbabwe. You do have
Some small.
not small, big producers of steel. They use the scrap,
Okay.
and then they mix steel, and then they export it to primarily South Africa because there's a heavy market. There's demand. So the demand here in Zimbabwe is actually not that much, but then in South Africa, and that has been going on for the last, I would say, 10 years or so, where you go around and you look for scrap,
Okay.
and then from that scrap you make all sorts of steel products, and then you sell them to South Africa. And you've got Chinese, Indian, and black manufacturers that have been. So if they're complaining, the issue is if they're complaining about it now, wait till Manhize is.
Well,
full throttle.
Manhize reported that they've done $100 million worth of sales year to date.
Yeah.
And they still have a lot of headroom.
No, they've got a lot of headroom. So if they're now on full throttle, then South Africa really,
Yeah, it says something about the South Africans, more about the South Africans than the Zimbabweans in that still space. So if the South Africans are not able to compete, are not that competitive to a point where maybe the scrap metals that are reprocessed, like you're talking about, or even the production coming from Manhize, which is probably not at just
capacity,
full capacity. It just tells you that maybe they've been inefficient for the longest time. And you know what, you might they might shut the doors on Zimbabwe, but that's not the only source, because I think steel can come all the way.
And the prices, the other crisis that we have
from China
is the prices of they're about the 5-year prices are half what they were 5 years ago.
Yep.
And that's a lot of pressure.
And also, so this is just one sector, but I mean, if they look at how much South Africa is exporting into Zimbabwe, I mean, we are pretty much getting most of what we want from South Africa.
Well, a lot of it is grey imports.
Yeah, but it's still
but it's still South African.
Yes, it's still South African. Yes.
Yeah, but they will have a lot of issues with Zimbabwean grey imports as well, and I think that's what they're hinting on.
Yeah,
that there are a lot of these grey imports, especially our cigarettes, and now still
so they just need to work on their own efficiencies. They need to ask themselves very difficult questions around: is this still viable?
Well, it's not at this current prices. Yeah. It's not viable. But to be fair to them, and perhaps that's the discussion I wanted to have, is that around the world still is a big issue. We've seen even America putting up tariffs primarily to protect their local industries. We've seen the Europeans as well, right? It's always around steel and motor manufacturing. But the prices, unfortunately for them, iron seems to be very abundant right across the world.
Well, iron is abundant,
and it's very difficult to push those prices because it affects a lot of the people that are actually employed in the motoring industries, right? Because surprise, cars are actually becoming cheaper and cheaper because the ingredients are becoming cheaper and cheaper. When you look at the raw materials, they're becoming cheaper and cheaper. So can we stop this?
So look, I think there's a broader philosophical issue at play here. If you think about South Africa, they've got world-class infrastructure, they've got big, deep capital markets, but their growth has been anemic over the last 5 to 10 years.
Yeah, less than 1%.
So what's actually going on there? It's not like they have a shortage of labor. They've got, if you look at the demographics, they're healthier than most other countries in the world. They've got a relatively young population.
Well, they tax capital entry,
right? So
is a tax, and I think there was a report that was done. It's costing close to billions of dollars because you're taxing somebody, you're taxing capital as it enters into South Africa, and it's becoming a big issue.
So they've got all these really what I would call quasi-socialist regulations around labor, around how capital is deployed. I think, BEE should have had a sunset clause, where, after a certain period of time, you're expected to be able to thrive, as an equal citizen, notwithstanding.
30 years later, we can't still be talking about BE 30 years later.
And that's why you don't see the capital flows into South Africa. You've got these iconic South African businesses exiting significant assets in South Africa, like Anglo American. And so the outlook is not great because they don't have an open free market capitalist system, and so I think that's where the challenge is with South Africa. Obviously, a lot of our issues in Zim is we've got this command and control mindset, and the world has changed from 150 years ago when most of the value was industrial, right? The steel manufacturers, the oil producers, those were the biggest companies in the world. Those are the most powerful, profitable companies. If you fast forward to today, right? What's the world's most valuable company by market capitalization? It's NVIDIA. They don't manufacture anything. They design chips. The chips are made in foundries owned by TSMC and Samsung and Texas Instruments, and they just create intellectual property, and they're worth $4 trillion.
We're still in Africa. We're far behind as far as that's concerned. But what are your thoughts?
Yeah, look, I was going to say South Africa hasn't been growing if you look at it from 1994. So the growth, so you'd expect that by now.
Well, to be fair, they grew from 1994 to about 2014.
Yes, the first 20 years they grew quite a lot.
They do.
But we didn't see a transformation of the economy.
Well, the middle class, I think there was a huge uplift of the middle class.
Yes, but at the same time, the policies have actually caused a significant.
In the last 10 years, yes.
Yeah, a significant outflow of capital.
Yes.
Yes. I think there was I was looking for some story that I saw where they say, is it about 2,000 millionaires have left South Africa? Like,
oh yeah.
And also I saw something on the JSE where it has been losing listings as well. Okay. Just like as we are seeing on the Zimbabwe Stock Exchange.
It's not capital friendly right now. South Africa.
So any time when you're expecting that they are, capital is coming into Africa, and when it's coming into Africa, it has to be in South Africa first, and then it gets distributed across the continent. It looks like maybe when global capital is looking at Africa, it's no longer about South Africa. There are probably other markets that are becoming more the gateways of capital into Egypt
Africa. Is doing very well.
Yeah.
So and they're actually also producing a lot of their products, and yeah, I think South Africa is definitely lagging behind. Another big issue, another big story that we need to talk about, which is actually very positive, is up to June we have produced about 20 tons of gold, which means that we could potentially do about 40 tons of gold, which is an improvement. I think the highest we've ever done is about 36 tons, which was in 2019.
Formally,
yeah,
because I believe that there's a lot more that's being
outside of the
formal.
Okay,
and those numbers.
Could you explain to me why would you export outside of the formal sector when you're getting full value?
So when you are getting full value in the formal sector, the proportion or the quantities that are exported informally are sort of come down. Okay. So yeah, so the numbers. So when you look at production,
so because we know that I just want to understand for my own sake, we know that there are people who are siphoning gold outside of the country across the borders. We know it's actually happening, but I just want to understand, why is it happening when you can get, no questions asked, you can get full cash here in Zim?
But it's not every time that we have got that dispensation. Every now and then there are policies that are introduced that sort of restrict the trading of gold. So if you really analyze it deeper, you'd find that whenever we have this sort of volatility or fluctuations in the production numbers, It's actually the reported numbers that are fluctuating.
Okay.
The
not
actual production is
so
not
we're
changing.
saying we're closer to what's actually
Exactly.
happening in production because
So it's not really up in production. It's
Okay.
up in reporting.
numbers.
Reported.
What are your thoughts on
Yeah,
this?
because I wanted to share with you some stats that over the average corporate producers do around 11 tons. They do 11 tons almost consistently, or maybe they report 11 tons almost consistently. But also I struggle in believing that number, that it can't just be flat over the years. So whenever I would have our numbers go closer to 20 or closer to 15, it was because of the deliveries from the informal sector, from artisanal miners. Yes. So if you are paying them well, so they're getting prices that are closer to international prices, and they're being paid cash, they're actually delivering more to Fidelity and other official channels. When you start introducing all these funny other policies, they will continue producing. It's not like the artisanal mine will say this year at Skenda Makomba, because that's their livelihood. What they'll just stop doing is to give anyone that then sells through Fidelity. You know? Yeah.
Right.
So that number, I think Zim can easily do 40 tons.
Okay.
Yeah, it's sort of current production. So obviously, with more exploration, with more,
we should double.
Yes,
I mean,
we should.
I would actually make the case that
the price. I mean, we're at 3,400, but it's actually come down from 3,500. Is this are the high prices, are they sustainable in the next 5 years or so?
Well, look, I don't have a crystal ball. I don't know what the gold price is going to be next year or the after. Although my best guess would be, given the way governments across the world are behaving so profligately, that fiat currencies are going to continue to lose value, and gold will continue to reach record highs for the foreseeable future. So based on what I've looked at, that's in the public domain. So there's a Kavango Resources is listing on the VFX, and Kadeng is also is in mining, and one of the consistent stories from all the key players in the former gold mining sector in Zimbabwe is that there is so much headroom, right? There's all this, because over the last 20-30 years, Zimbabwe has been so unfriendly to capital that there's been very little exploration. So we've got a lot of resource out there that is not JOC certified, because the investment in drilling and exploration and certifying that there's so much gold here didn't happen. And actually, one of the interesting ways of thinking about it when you look at artisanal mining, right, is if these guys are being so productive with their rudimentary techniques, right? Imagine if, hundreds of millions or billions of capital was deployed by mining majors, drilling, kilometer,
well, ours is not deep.
Yeah, so
in terms of just capital.
So they bring in this massive yellow equipment, and they do what the Korokozas are doing at like 100,000 times the scale. That is
will be massive. I mean, an interesting story this week was actually South Africa opened its first gold mine in the last 15 years.
Wow.
Unbelievable.
I don't think that's unbelievable. I think it's perfectly normal.
Well, remember, of all the gold we have in the world, South Africa, I think, produced closer to 35% of all the gold we've ever produced in the world. And to think that they are now, not even in the top 10 of gold producers, and they're opening their first gold mine in the last 15 years. It just tells you that there is an opportunity as far as Zimbabwe is concerned. But I think we need enough capital to go in there.
Yeah,
because if we're producing 40 tons, it's just not enough.
So Gauteng was built on gold. Like, if you look at South African gold production at its peak, like in terms of just the capital deployed, how many human beings
they were
worked in
producing
gold
more than
mining
200 tons
at the
a year.
time. Like that,
massive,
Houghton was
200
built on gold.
So the problem that I have with how we have gone about, extracting our resources is, I don't seem to see any deliberate policy framework that says, okay, we're going to invest so much in trying to ascertain how much gold we have under, how much platinum, how much whatever mineral.
Yeah, exploration.
So that's exploration. But then when you have explored and you know how much you have, then the next stage will be like, okay, extracting. At what rate are we extracting it? And when we do that, what are we going to do with the proceeds? Because it's gold. It's not going to be gold forever.
You cut into the heart of the matter. And I think you addressed it earlier on. Because what you're saying is, if government believes we're not in a crisis and believes that we're doing very well, then they're not going to increase gold production.
But it's not government's remit. I want to push back. It's not government's remit to increase gold production.
No, it is. Because if you think about it from a policy perspective, if they took away the 30% retention and they took away the regulatory environment and they just say, you know what, we are going to be a US dollar economy for the next 50 years and no 30% retention. And if you come in, we're protecting your money and no questions asked. Then you will see the Barrick Gold, you will see the big mining companies coming into Zimbabwe, and you will see production increase 3-4 times.
No, 10 times. That's
10 times, exactly. Yeah. So it has to do with capital.
It's the policy. So it's because the government is in the way. It's not that it's government's remit to increase production. Right?
No, it is a policy.
Creating an environment.
An environment, an enabling environment. Because if they're out of the way, then everything will just there'll be a huge boost. And speaking on that, let's talk about Old Mutual, because in their results they've said to their shareholders, we have a problem, we can't get our dividends to South Africa, outside of Zimbabwe.
Is that true?
Yeah, they've 34 million US dollars. Part of it has to do with legacy debt, which was stuck with RBZ for a very long time, and then RBZ moved it to Treasury. So yes, but then it means they haven't moved that dividend in 6-7 years. Then the new dividend, that's what they've said in their latest annual report.
So I am surprised, because the few sessions that I've sat through, being addressed by the central bank officials, including the governor, the key takeaway was, if anyone wants to move out their money, they can do that freely now. So I'm actually surprised that this is still the situation, and that's not really a good way of marketing yourselves. And this is all mutual. And and it's actually worse in this age of AI and big data and whatever, because this is the information that's put out there, which if someone's looking to do something into Zim and they're looking for information, what the algorithms are going to pick about, okay, the investing environment in Zimbabwe, some story that says one of the biggest investors, more than 100 years of capital commitment in this market, cannot move out their dividends. So if you can't take out your dividends, why would you want to invest in that country in the first place? So it's surprising. I would want to believe that it's not true, until it has been.
It's in the annual report. And between the two of us, I'm much more optimistic than you, and I'm surprised that you're surprised. Right? I think the reason this is sadly, there's this Old Mutual was delisted suspended from the Zimbabwe Stock Exchange in 2021 based on a false narrative. Now, I'm not going to speculate as to what motivated the invention of this false narrative. But I will draw a line of causality between this false narrative around Old Mutual being an economic saboteur of Zimbabwe and them not being able to remit their dividends. Because I know many other companies do not have that challenge. So that's the only that's my best guess. That this is they are still under this cloud.
That's very interesting because and you guys are in the capital markets. I want to hear your thoughts on this because we've got First Capital. They've again declared dividend, and thanks to Rufaro on X. He highlighted
not this Rufaro.
Yeah. But my namesake,
the youngster used to work with us at some point.
Yeah.
Right. But anyway, the point is, I think I quite like these ex post because he highlighted that the annualized dividend yield would be 25%, which means somebody would
phenomenal.
That's phenomenal. You get your money back in 4 years. So then the question now arises: if you're a foreign investor, are they able to pay that dividend out? Because that's a Malawian company.
Oh, I have it on good authority that they're paying out those dividends. And you know what? When that transaction happened, I was a doubting Thomas, to be quite honest. I just thought, look, Barclays is this, multinational, franchise that has a certain clientele that go to Barclays because it's a UK-based big bank, and when it transitioned to First Capital, I figured a lot of the customers who are there, especially the multinationals, who are there because when you're in Zim, you have to bank with a certain kind of institution. They might not have a reason to continue that relationship. I was really skeptical about their capacity to continue to run that bank profitably, and they've certainly shamed my skepticism. They've done incredibly well. They've actually grown it and made it more profitable than when it was operating under the Barclays banner, and they're paying these significant dividends. In fact, I
think it actually bodes well for Zimbabwean companies if they pay these very aggressive dividends. Because then we might be able to attract international investors. Because if you tell an international investor that, okay, come into Zimbabwe, it's tumultuous and it's choppy waters, but guess what? I think in 4 years' time, you will have your money back.
So I would actually say they've managed to do that because they are not a global brand. There are things that a Barclays could not do.
That's a very good point.
That Stanchart could not do. But they are coming from Malawi. So they are in other markets where, crisis, they see them differently.
And perhaps that's why they have an aggressive dividend policy.
So if you'd recall, Barclays just after dollarization, they used to have this safe banking model. So basically, it just meant we are collecting deposits and sitting on them. We are not lending. So they had a balance sheet that had some very cheap retail deposits on them. So Barclays and Stanbic are some banks that would pass on me every time I would analyze their numbers, because the interest expense would be like a very tiny number, less than $1 million. Then interest income would be like tens of millions, if not close to 100
times.
Yes,
more.
Because basically they were taking your money for nothing. And so even if they were to then create some assets for 5-10%, it's 10% on zero cost. But so these guys, when they looked at it, that is what they saw. That there's this balance sheet that wasn't being
sorted. They didn't get a deposit flight. Don't you think that's Rufaro's point? Because while you're correct that you're getting all these deposits at near 0%, but post the Barclays buyout, the First Bank buyout, there wasn't a deposit flight.
Yeah,
those deposits still remained.
Yes, I think that's thanks to whatever they did, because they managed to, keep most of the deposits there. But I think they also then were providing more services to these people than Barclays would. You know, the things that probably Barclays would not do for them. Because, I mean, people would just keep their monies at a Barclays Standard for safekeeping, more like a safe deposit box, right? Even if you would, at the back of your mind, would say, I would want to earn something of it. Now you have to choose between, you know, do you want to take the risk putting it in this bank and get, say, 50% return?
Sorry, it's because we're now running out of time. But before we leave, I've got a question for you guys, because you're in the capital markets, because it really puts this argument around mergers and acquisitions. That is it better to start a new bank, or it's better to buy a going concern? What are your thoughts? Especially given what, because if First Bank had started,
First Capital Bank
had started a new bank in Zim, a greenfield, do you think that they would have been as successful?
They would have struggled.
They would have struggled.
Yeah, but when you buy, it's also about who you buy. But because we know, of investors who bought into bad brands, you know, and you know, those businesses, they could not sustain
Your thoughts?
because of that.
Yeah, and I also think it depends on where you're coming from. So if you look at, for example, another Barclays alumni,
Stanchard.
No. His name is slipping my mind, but they basically bought Bank ABC.
Bob Diamond.
Right?
Yeah.
And, you know, he used to be based out in Dubai running Barclays Africa. And, you know, within the Barclays culture and way of doing things. And, you know, the Atlas Mara's African investments fared really poorly. Right.
Well, that's what I'm saying.
They're coming from Barclays.
They're coming from this culture. Because Bob Diamond is an American and he was an investment banker.
They were not buying Barclays.
No. Hear me out. What I'm saying is, so even though they were not buying
Barclays, out of time. Make your point.
Even though they were not buying Barclays, right? They brought that mindset. Whereas the Malawians who bought Barclays were based in Malawi, were running a pan-African banking business with operations in Zambia and Botswana and Mozambique, and they understood exchange control that fails. They understood all these issues that we're confronted with here in Zimbabwe, right? So they came with that mindset of operating successful
to get the deposits.
Yes, and they knew how to compete in a market like Zim. So because you need an African market.
So what did Bob Diamond get wrong?
He came with a Barclays mindset.
There you have it, ladies and gentlemen. That was exciting and very illuminating. I hope you learned as much as I did, and I hope that we made the case on why we believe that what CZI and ZNCC are doing and pushing for a meeting with the president and for issues to be addressed with the president, I think that will actually help the country and everybody.
Before you close,
involved.
you speak to our numbers.
Okay, so what? Oh, okay. Yeah, we need more subscribers.
The road to 10,000.
The road to 10,000. So please like, share, subscribe, and let's
How many
get to
subscribers
10,000.
do we have? I thought we were at 10,000 already.
No, we're on 9.69.
Yeah, almost
9.7. So we need 300 more.
Okay.
Yeah, let's get there.
And that's huge, guys. This is organic growth.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, it's
absolutely.
not like we buy views or subscribers or whatever.
Why are you looking at astrologers? But anyway,
I was just showing you our numbers. I don't know why then you have to scroll down.
We'll have a word with your pastor. Cheers, everybody.
Cheers.